I'm not gonna ignore you. I'm not
Bro,
gonna.
it's 5 in the morning. I didn't want to be like, yo, what's up? And just give him a fist bump. That's it.
Okay. Okay, so I want to maybe talk a little bit about a few interesting about fear and courage and some of these topics. Kiddush Hashem, why it should be, what is dying al Kiddush, what are these things? There's a pasuk in Mishlei. There's a pasuk in Mishlei that actually this people started talking about this pasuk a little bit in the early Corona days, because the targum of one of the words is Corona, is Korone. So it says, listen to the pasuk: Ruach ish yechalkal machaleu, Ruach necheya mi yisa'ena. Ruach ish, a person's spirit, yechalkel machaleu, can make like mechalkel, can support his machala, his physical weakness. So if a person has some sort of physical illness or weakness, you can make up for that with a good spirit. Ruach necheya, but if a person who has a crushed spirit, a low spirit, mi yisena, who's going to lift it up? That's a pasuk. So it says, I'll read you the Gra first, and then Rabbeinu Yonah, but they're both Ruach ish. He says, we earlier said in Mishlei that Simcha comes al yedei haruach. Simcha is something that is a matter of the spirit. That's joy, happiness. Is that Ruach ish? What kisha ish tamid b'simcha? If a person feels happy on a regular basis, consistently happy, hu yechalkel machaleo, avshalov machalach hasashalom. Even if a sickness comes to a person, physical challenges, yechalkel machaleo b'simchaso, he'll survive it because of his simcha and he'll be fine. Av mi sheish lo ruach necheya, but a person who has like a depressive attitude about things, who's a real pessimist, for who eats avon, it's depression. Mi yochel lisa azos, who can carry that? In other words, your body can't help you carry that. He says, Rabbeinu Yonah writes like this. So this is about simcha and depression. But the way Rabbeinu Yonah says it, it's about something a little different. He says, Ruach adam yisbol choli haguf. A person who has physical ailments, a person's spirit can carry him through that. Kenyan shenamar leiv sameach itav geya. Kasher tidag haruach v'te'enach. But when a person's spirit, so in other words, there's a way to deal with illness, right? We know about Chai Lifeline and other organizations where just by keeping people in good spirits, you have a better chance of living through challenging times. I mean, it's a real thing, and we know that in general, the hope that's provided by the placebo effect is a real scientific thing, that when a person really believes that things are going to be okay, it has a meaningful scientific influence. It's not just Pollyannish. So, however, the one thing you have to get through things is your disposition and your positivity and your simcha. If you don't have that, what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to use? Positivity to get over depression? I mean, like, your positivity's down. Milashon. Okay, so then he says, he hadaiga. What we're talking about is daiga. Daiga is worry. You understand? Worry. Ubalach lehazhir min hade'aga. This is coming to warn us against daiga. Don't worry. Shelo yashli tena ha'adam al nafsho. A person cannot allow worry to gain any control over them. Aval yishtadel livtoach b'Hashem v'lehishayin belokav. A person has to work hard to trust in God and make sure things are going to be okay. So in other words, people like to use this. First of all, the word corona was in that targum. And it was very important because a person is sitting around the whole day worrying about it is going to get it. Just, in other words, being positive and being confident has the impact of... So that's a very important thing. You know, in warfare, it's a huge part of the warfare, is to create, fear in the other people. To the point, where it says that Avraham Avinu went to war, and he would throw sticks and globs of dirt, and they would turn into arrows and spears and different things. So the Me'am Loez, which is like a very Kabbalistically inclined sefer, right? I mean, Me'am Loez is not known for its rationalism. The Me'am Loez there says his own pshat, that he thinks that it's not that it actually turned into swords and spears, but that was with the Koach HaDimyon. that it was using like psychological warfare, essentially. In other words, whatever Avraham Avinu was doing in the war, people were so significantly worried that they imagined it was as if there were swords and spears coming after them. They fled and they died and all kinds of things happened. Not that physically you would have watched clumps of dirt go up in the air. And that's the Amloiz's pshat. I'm not making it up. I wouldn't have the guts to make up such a thing. Although whenever you see such a thing, it should always open your eyes to the possibility that in other agados, which can sound fantastic and wild, that it's not a lack necessarily of Yiras Shamayim to suggest an interpretation that doesn't necessarily make it as fantastic sounding. I mean, listen, if the reason that you're suggesting that interpretation is because you don't believe in an infinite God who could have done that, so then you're very foolish. But it's always worthwhile when you see something like this to realize it's not a one-time, this one Gemara he's learning, that was a Mahalach and learning Agadas. Okay, I'll call upon him. There is also one more thing. Rabbeinu Bechaya. I mean, and this is very significant because first of all, people are talking about the impact of the psychological, warfare in terms of frightening videos and different things, and it's not a small thing. It's not a small thing. If a person can maintain, whether it's more news, less news, whatever it takes, but if a person can maintain their mental state so that they're not experiencing daiga, they're not experiencing worry, they feel confident, they feel that is an enormous predictor of who's going to succeed in the war, and who's going to succeed as a person, and who's going to be healthy in life. So this is no small thing. There are a lot of people that are facing this. I'm not sure how many people that I'm talking to right now in person are necessarily, facing this themselves. But even if you're not, maybe your wife is, maybe your sister is, maybe your uncle is, maybe your friend is. There are a lot of people who are pretty worried. They're pretty concerned. They're waking up in the night. They're alarmed. And what we just maintaining positivity and whatever that takes is such a success. It's an enormous achievement, and it's a good thing. And you say, well, literally, if a person's watching less news, and because they know less about what's going on, they have less daiga, they're actually in a better place. They're in a better place. Yeah. Okay, so.
It has to be interpreted as not caring.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it.
People feel guilty, like, okay,
correct. That's a very good thing to point out. Meaning, some people feel like they're helping out. If you're driving in the car and you have the chance to just listen to a shir, maybe on a different subject. I mean, I don't intend every single time, forever, to only talk about this as long as this is going on. Hopefully it'll be very quick, and that will be the story. But at a certain point, a person also has to just hear other things, and also think about other things, but there could be a part of a person that feels like, how can I betray my brothers and sisters and what's going on by just turning on something funny or turning on some music and it's a big misunderstanding, because we win by not succumbing to daiga and worry and fear, and so we keep ourselves abreast of what's going on. And when a person goes to the Beit Midrash, this we would all understand, right? You go to learn. I see this morning, sitting there and learning, and there's people coming in for 3-4 hours, not looking at their phones, not looking at anything, sitting down and learning. So none of us think that that's betraying the Jewish people. We all see that's a good thing. So the very same thing, if you can go 3-4 hours without looking at the news, because you don't have to, and you don't need to, and that's going to keep you to be a healthier person, which means a better Jew, and a better father, and a better husband, and a better friend, and whatever else. So then you've done an enormous mitzvah, even if you weren't learning during that time, if you're working or doing something else. So a person has to find the right balance, but this should be well thought out. This should not just be something like, well, yeah, of course I feel worried, but who wouldn't feel worried in a time of war? Like no. You will be much more successful at everything in Yiddishkeit. Whatever your job is in Am Yisrael that you feel like is meaningful, because there's got to be a reason why you're not running to the battlefield. Apparently, there's something else for you to do. So whatever that is, let's make sure that we're with confidence and simcha. It's very significant. The introduction to Sefer Parsha Shlach by Rabbeinu Bechaya. Rabbeinu Bechaya has a very interesting thing that in every single parsha of the week, in his commentary on Chumash, he has an introduction where he takes psukim from Mishlei. He starts with a pasuk from Mishlei, and then he explains it and goes into it, and that's how he introduces the parsha every week. And he says something very interesting. Shlach is when they sent, sort of the first time they would go to scout out for war. So he wants to discuss what's the appropriate way to handle a war. Shlomo HaMelech Yazir Kol Adam B'Kosav Zeh. Shlomo HaMelech brings a pasuk. The pasuk is Sus Muchan Leyom Milchama. The horse is prepared for the day of battle. V'la Hashem hateshua. But salvation only comes from Hashem. So that's the pasuk. So he says a person is obligated Lasos kol davar sheyitzarech lasos ubederech hateva kol ma shebekocho. A person has an absolute obligation to do everything that they can, naturally and reasonably, to win the war. Sheyimsor hashar, and everything else, everything that's not out of your control. So you've done what you can, whatever that is. If you can send money to help people buy bulletproof vests, if you can, whatever you can actually do in terms of the war effort, you have to do. The second that you've done that, Yimsor hashar bidei shamayim, everything else you have to put into God's hands completely. Ki hanes eino chal ela b'chesed hateva. God only does miracles when nature is no longer able to. So you do everything you can, and then you leave everything up to Hashem. So first of all, the first thing he's saying is you should not just leave things up to Hashem and say, what do I have to do my part for? Let me just leave it up to God. And he says a few more interesting things here. It says, Hashem is the healer of all people. Lo begvurus asos yechbatz lo b'shoki yeshiyatza sheker hasos yeshua. He says, ultimately, all these things come from Hashem. You know, it says in the... It goes on a little bit this more. I'll show you a couple things here. He gives a few examples. He says, why didn't Hashem just tell Noach to walk on water? He asked this question. So what's the answer? My whole life, the answer that I heard is so people should see him building the ark. Still, why does you have to go in? Right? In other words, once the Mabel's here and all those people are gone, why is it necessary for him to stay? He asks this. He mamish says, I don't know if when he's saying walk on water, if he's thinking of the famous other religions that talk about it. Why not just have them walk on water and just live on water for a while? What does he have to build a teva for? The reason the Torah tells us to do this, you have to do stuff. You have to do physical things. But then, with all of our hard work, so this is like a really tough thing. You cannot just sit there and wait for God. But then, as soon as you do anything, you're expected to know none of this has anything to do with your hard work. This is mind-blowing. That's what Shlomo says. When you've prepared your horse, you're all ready for the war. He talks about Yoshi. He gives a few other examples of this. Right. Preparing for war. The concept that it's only up to Hashem. You know, it's brought. I saw both Rebbe Yashiv and his son Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky were asked in different places. One of them is in a tshuva from Rebbe Yashiv. He just sort of is. What is al hanisim, val purkon, val gvuros, val chus, val milchamos? What's the milchamos? Why wouldn't it? What's the person asked Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky? Wouldn't it be better if there wasn't a war at all? So he says that there's a Gemara in the beginning of Meseches, in the beginning of Meseches Avodah Zarah that we learned over Sukkos, where it says that the Persians said, we did this, we did that, and we did milchamos. We did lots of milchamos, and it was all for the Jews to learn Torah. And Hashem says, listen, these are the things you did for yourself, to take taxes, and you wanted money, or whatever. And the milchamos, ani asisi. I made the wars. Hashem ish milchama. You didn't have anything to do with the wars. I started the wars, I finished the wars. All wars is all milchamos, ani asisi. So he says, we're saying that, thank you Hashem, ala milchamos sha'asis lavasenu, that Hashem wages the wars, and He wins the wars, and He finishes them. So our part is completely to let go and just say, Hashem, yilochem lachem, v'atem tacharisha. God is fighting for us, not us. Now, I don't understand. We're sending in people. People are going in. You have to do everything you can. It is one of the hardest things. It's one of the hardest things to maintain bitachon when a person really throws himself into something. Okay, so that's point number one. I want to jump to something different, as follows. But I think it connects very nicely, but we'll start here. Did I lose a paper? Sorry. I printed out what I thought I needed. There we go. This is this pasuk in Micha Perek Hey. It says, "V'haya she'eris Yaakov Bagoyim bekerev amim rabim. I once mentioned this. This is something that in shul one Shabbos I spoke about this in the drasha for a short, 5-7 minutes. But there's so much good stuff here. So She'eris Yaakov, the remnant of the Jewish people, bekerev amim rabim. That's during Golus, right? The Jewish people that are left in exile, ke'aryeh bevahamos ya'ar. They'll be like an aryeh among the nations among the behemoths of the forest. Kechfir be'edrei tzon, like a kfir. Kfir is a young, strong lion who's there to defend the other lions in the pride, and he's be'edrei tzon. So you know what happens when you let a kfir into a sheep pen? Asher im avar v'romas v'torah ve'ein matzo. Those sheep are going to band together. There's nothing they can do. The Jewish people are going to be like lions who were let into the sheep's pen. That's what Golus is going to be like. So, is there a time in Jewish history that you can recall that we were like the lion and everyone else was like the sheep? It's almost like this was a misprint. And Micha means the other way, right? Like what? It's very hard to understand. Maybe you could say, well, in the times of Shlomo, right? There were times the Jewish people were so powerful. Could be, but it says She'eris Yaakov, Bekerev Amim Rabim. So it's talking about the relationship between Jews and Goyim when we're amongst all the Goyim and we're like a lion. So that is very tough pasuk. So you open up a Shulchan Aruch. You want to find out about a lion. So it says the first thing in Shulchan Aruch is Yiskaber Kari Lamod Baboker Lavodas Baro. A person should be strong like a lion every morning to get up and serve Hashem. Shehehu Ma'orer HaShachar. You need to wake up in the morning. David HaMelech said, Ura Kavodi, Ura Nevel V'chinor, Ira Shachar. I wake up in the morning. Now you can predict what time. I mean, MyZmanim.com is excellent, right? It's whatever time it says there, that's always what happens, right? What does it mean you're going to wake up in the morning? So the metaphor is, I guess, you'll be up before the morning. You'll be up before sunrise. Is that really the halacha that you have to be up before sunrise? I mean, I'm not sure if that's true. It's a big ma'ila to daven vasikin, but I don't believe that a person is breaking halacha if they ever sleep until a little bit later. So here's what it says in the Taz. The Taz says like this. He says, Teva ha'ari asher ein lo yireh mishum beri. Here's what a lion is. A lion has no predators going after him. There are animals that are somewhat impervious to the lions. Big elephants are really they're not so worried about a lion. A giraffe can give one good kick to a lion and render him brain dead. They're very powerful legs. And with both legs at once, when they go, poof, forget it. That's one of the reasons people don't eat giraffes. Even from people, it's not because it's the easiest animal to shecht. There's no problem with that part of it. It's not because we don't know where on the neck. It's this big. You can do it anywhere. The problem is it's tough meat. It's hard. I think there's only one reservation in Kenya where they serve giraffe. There's also giraffes walking around and poking their heads in the second-story window where you're eating giraffe. And it's like a shtick for people. It's tough meat. So lions are not completely able to do everything they want, always, but there's nobody coming after them. As opposed to other animals that they're sleeping with one eye open, like the tzvi, right? The lion is just hunkers down. You know when he wakes up? Whenever he darn well wants to wake up. Nobody wakes him up. He's a lion. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so the Jewish people are supposed to get up in the morning, not when your Yetzer Hara tells you, not when you want to get up. Wake the morning. You don't be like, well, my pillow feels good. No Yetzer Hara involved. What do you do? You do what you want. That's Ezehu Gibor Ka'aryeh, right? Ezehu Gibor HaKodesh is Yetzer. Aryeh is Gematria Gevura. And we have this concept. I'll just throw something at you that's interesting. That I like this one as a redhead. That things in the world. It's brought down. The Chidah brings down something really interesting. He says he brings from earlier Kabbalistic sources that the shape and color of every single thing you see in the world is related to its spiritual makeup. So if something is green, that's going to be significant. And Queen Esther's called Yurak Rekas and this and that, every color. So you notice an interesting thing that's observable is that every single thing that is called Gevura is a similar, for example, the lion is like an orangey, right, color. So is the sun. and the sun is called Kitseis HaShemesh B'Gvuroso. And David HaMelech, who was a redhead, is called Lev Ha'aryeh. He was called an Esav, who's called a Gibor, right? Also has a similar coloring. And you find consistently that things in the world that represent, so the lion, Aryeh, is Gematria Gevura. It represents Gevura. Gavriel, who's the Malach of Gevura, Gavriel, is described as Gavriel is fire and Michal is water. Over and over and over again. In Chazal, in Psukim, the truth is, when Michal wants to go take a burning hot coal, he has to use Melkachayim, which either means, like tweezers or whatever, tongs, or it's an angel whose name is Tongs. That's another approach to the Psukim. But that's what happens in Maisim Merkava. Because in order to, is that something? I mean, that's so Gevura is Gematria Aryeh, and the Aryeh represents, in fact, it's brought down in the Sefer Shmua Tova, Reb Shlomo Halevi of Kasani. I don't know if anybody knows who that is. I didn't know who it was until I saw this quote some time ago. But he says that Yisrael is Rashi Tevos, Yiskaber la'asos ritzon avinu shebashamayim. So we know Yiskaber Kabila, that's the beginning of Shulchan Aruch. Interestingly, by the way, is that Yiskaber Ka'ari, the first two words of Shulchan Aruch, is Gematria Yosef ben Ephraim Karo. So Rabbi Yosef Karo put that right in there, and others want to say also that's a famous one. They write about this a little bit because there's a big Indian. It's brought already from the Rokeach and others that you should always hint to your name in the Sefer and whatever. So Gishmak, Yiskaber Kari is Yosef ben Ephraim Karo. That's Rabbi Yosef Karo. Okay, so the lion, David praised himself that his orus always came from him. He didn't wait for the morning to wake him up. You see, in life, this is a very important thing. Hayarach shavecha lo b'tzar. Did you ever daven when you weren't in trouble? Says the pasuk. Meaning, sometimes we wait until something happens. So I'm going to give you an example of something that I hear a lot. And Klal Yisrael may have waited on this one. There was a lot of disunity. I don't believe in predicting the reasons things happened. That's very just 2,000 years of nothing making sense means that we don't always know why Hashem does things, and we can probably get comfortable with that. But sometimes you have two brothers who haven't spoken in years, and when one of their children got cancer, and they were standing in the hospital, they made up and they hugged and they worked it out. Don't wait for things. Be the lion. Do it when it's on the right. Do it from your own inspiration. Don't wait for something to force you into it. And the truth is that there was a lot of disunity in the land of Israel, and we've probably never seen such love and unity happening now. I'm putting aside so many differences, and that's a huge bracha, but there's still a lot of areas in our life that we can probably improve, including Yenachtos and other things, whatever that is. And I'm not saying it as an attack. I'm just saying the things that we would like to be better at, don't wait until you're forced into it. That's the first lesson of Shulchan Aruch. Wake up in the morning do you believe that it's a good idea to daven in the morning? So start doing it. Just get up and do it. Be a gibor. Kovish is yitzra. Stop allowing. Are you going to leave this world and be like, boy, am I glad that I always gave in to another 10 minutes on the snooze button? Get up. In 10 minutes, you can do a lot of davening. It's so, you understand? And that's the first lesson of Shulchan Aruch. That's what it means. And that's what it means Yisrael. Okay. So, there's a Sefer Shevet Yehuda. I'll give you a few stories to illustrate the point I want to make. He was Reb Shlomo ben Virga, was a famous author who was killed in the Spanish Inquisition. He was tortured to death by these terrible people. But first he wrote a lot. He wrote copious amounts. And he has a book called Shevet Yehuda, which is one of the big treasures that we have 500 years old, and he says, "Ksatzmin ha'anusim molu espeneim l'shmonei." Small amount of Marranos, crypto Jews, conversos, used to give their children. They were converted to Christianity ostensibly, but they tried to keep Yiddishkeit, and they would do their own bris milah for their children, because you couldn't risk telling anyone. Uktsasam molu es atzam be'etzem yedehen ve'yosam gedolim. He says many people would give themselves a bris milah on their own as an adult. They weren't trained in anything, and there was no one in the world they could even ask for advice on how to do it. Me'yira sheyigaleh hadavar. Then he says like this. So first of all, and he had a story that the Inquisition came to him when they figured out who he was. So they tortured him for years. Amad b'yisurim no'iraim v'kashim, and he never gave the name of one person. And ultimately, he died of his torture. Rosh Shlomo Molcho. So he says there were people giving themselves bris milas. Rosh Shlomo Molcho, who was also, he was 1500 to 1532. So he didn't get to live out his whole life. I mean, he was born in Portugal. His name was Diego Pires. That was his name, not Shlomo Molcho. He was an extremely fascinating man. He was a big makubal. There was even a famous story when he went to debate the Pope in Rome because he wanted to bring the Geula. Very interesting person. Yeah. So he was killed in a horrible, gruesome, by terrible people. But he wrote Svarim. He was a very, very interesting person. He became from on his own. He was raised as, he's born 1500. So this was after he figured out and started studying Judaism on his own. So listen to him. He wrote a letter that's published in the Sefer Chayas Kana. And it says, Balayla Asisi Bris Mila. One night I decided the time has come to give myself a Bris Mila. Ve'enish iti. There's nobody around. V'kadosh Baruch Hu l'man shemo azarani urifa'ani. He says, thank God I survived and Hashem helped me survive. Afal pi shetzar gadol v'ke'ev hirgashti v'nisalafti. He says, halfway through I felt so much pain, halfway through the bris, that I fainted. So, sometimes I remember this as a kid, people fainting when they're standing at a bris because they see the blood. I remember that. As a kid, someone standing next to me, one of the adults in my shul, fainted right on the floor. This guy fainted because he had just given himself halfway through the bris. Ki hadam hayashoses kemayan amiskaber. The blood was flowing like a never-ending spring. The harachaman arofe nemon ripa osi b'me'atzman lo yu'uman ki yisupri. He says, I can't believe how quickly I got better. He says it was because Hashem performed, a kindness to me. Rabbi Nasha ben Israel. So he was 100 years later, 1604 to 1657. He was in Amsterdam. He was born a Marrano in Madeira, and his name was actual Manuel Diaz Soero. That was his name. After his father escaped, so Menashe ben Israel's father escaped the Auto da Fe. Is that how we say it? That's the public burning, and he was supposed to be burned in Lisbon. And somehow he managed to escape and came to the Netherlands. And they resumed their Jewish identity. And he was a little bit of like a child prodigy. The first book was written at 17. He wrote a lot to defend the Jewish people, in the eyes of the Christians and others. He wrote amazing books, Menashe ben Yisrael. Rembrandt painted him. There's a famous Rembrandt painting of him. So he was a friend of Rembrandt's. He was a very interesting man, Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael, a big important Jew. So he writes in a sefer Mikveh Yisrael, the hope of Israel. He says, V'gam nisraf hakadosh Eli Nazareno. I think Nazareno means the Holy One or something. This guy whose name was Eli, Ayin Lamed Yud, like Eli HaKohen. B'shnas Shin Sadites Ula Notzrim. Then he says the Christian year was Elef Taf Reish Lamed Ches. Was 1638. Elef Taf Reish Lamed Ches. So in 1638, he says, Eli Nazareno was burnt to death. What happened? He was nitvas v'nechevash bebeisa asurim. This guy in the Spanish Inquisition was captured, discovered that he was keeping. What was he doing? You understand? Why are you getting killed, buddy? Because I kept Shabbos, because I put on my tefillin, because I kept kosher. That's what it was. Yud Dalet Shanim, 14 years. 14 years. For 14 years, he refused to eat anything not kosher. He wouldn't do it. So I'll die, but I'm not eating. Lo achal basar. He wouldn't eat any meat they served him. He wasn't circumcised when he got in there. But at certain points, I need to have a bris milah. I don't want to die without a bris milah. It sounds like he found some discarded torture implements. Right? There was something sharp in there that they were using to torture him for 14 years. And when no one was around, he gave himself a proper bris milah. Made the brachas. I mean, can you imagine? Anu also be yisurin kashin v'amad be'emunas. He went horrible yisurin, and he stood by it. There's another story here. Rabbi Zriel Tauber has this story in his book Pirkei Machshava, Emuno Bitachon. He says one of the important families in Spain managed to keep their Judaism a secret, and they were wealthy. And the Inquisition found them out. They always found them out. I mean, they found a lot of people that weren't. They were good at this. They were good at digging stuff up and getting confessions out of people when it wasn't true. But in this case, one of the dear friends of the family tipped them off, and they had minutes. With minutes to spare, they got in a carriage and flew out of there. And they got to Machane Plitim in Morocco. You had this. You had these refugee camps. And they made it to Morocco in a refugee camp, but it was a terrible place to live. There was diseases and things, and pretty soon, oni, umachalos. So first of all, they were impoverished. By the time they got there, they had nothing left. They left behind their house and their estate, and how much money could they have taken with them? And then there was a magefo. There was some sort of illness that broke out in the camp. People were dying right and left. Chalalim rabim od al yamin val small. People were dying. And one morning, people weren't waking up in the mornings to the point that this guy lost his wife and all of his children, maybe 11 children. I mean, he lost everybody. So now he's here, just because he's a Jew, living in some camp in Morocco. I mean, I don't know that living in Morocco was ever such a treat, but he said like this. He says, the guy, I don't know who recorded this, but you know this is not far-fetched. I mean, you want to know something. It's just a story. Amar Ribbon Shalom. He raised his eyes to the heaven. He said, Ribbon Shalom. Yodani shekol hatzlal she'avru alai hayinisan. He says, I know that whatever's happening to me is a test. I know. I believe that. He says, the test is when I'm going to stop believing in you. Am I going to stop loving you? He says, listen. There's only two things I have left. I lost all my money. I lost all my people that I love. I don't have anything left in the world. I have only two things left. One of them is my life, and one of them is my trust in you, my emunah. He says, if you want to take my life, it's yours. You can take it whenever you want. I can't stop you from doing that. But if you want to take away my love for you, he says, no. You were very clear that you gave people free choice. And that you can't take that from me. You're not able to. You gave me free, as long as you give me free choice, I'm going to keep loving you. I don't know if anybody saw the video where Rav Moshe Sternbach spoke on Hoshana Rabbah. So it's a little eerie because he spoke on Hoshana Rabbah in Eretz Yisrael about times when people were, experiencing slaughter on Simchas Torah. And he said, we're in such a tough situation now, everyone should really pray. He says, who knows what's going to be? Like, it's a little eerie. It's hard to say. I don't know if he always talks like that. But some people make a big deal out of that. I mean, he's an old tzaddik in Yerushalayim. He's close to 100 years old, if not. He's a big gadol, so it's... sometimes there is this idea, it seems, that people can have some premonitions and things. Who knows? I don't know. That's not really my line of work. I have no idea how to process that. But what he said was, he told a story. He told an amazing story of somebody whose name escapes me, but you can watch this. He says, it was Simchas Torah right after the Holocaust. And people just didn't want to dance. They just didn't want to dance. And the guy says to his students, he says, you understand, Hitler can kill us if he wants to. He can kill everyone. But he cannot touch even one minhag Yisrael and change it. We have to dance with the same spirit and the same energy because that's what Jews are supposed to do on this day, and it doesn't make a difference. And he says they started to dance, and everyone was crying and dancing, and it was so inspirational. And that story is very much the story of the Jewish people, that you can try anything you want. You understand? You can try anything you want to kill the Jews, and you're going to kill some. You could kill me, but you can't get me to do anything I don't want to do. That's a lion. A lion is a person that when they come and say, listen, we want you to convert to this other religion, it doesn't matter if you have a gun. I'm stronger than your gun. I'm the lion here. I only do what I want to do. I only wake up when it's time for me to wake up. It seems to me, the pshat of the pasuk, that the Jewish people have demonstrated over the Golus that no matter how unpleasant things can turn, you can't get them to let go of Hashem and of Torah and mitzvos as a community, as a whole. That's why we're still here. And, Yisurei HaGolus, the Ram has this language of the Yisurin of Golus are borurin from among the Jewish people. Some of the wicked and some of the people that are less serious. The Rambam says that. He says those who assimilate over the course of exile are people that their neshamas really didn't belong. That's the Rambam's language. It's very hard to understand also exactly what he means, but he says this. He says there Yusur Hagolos Baru, some people that are not by Shanim and Rachmanim and Gomnei Chasadim, and they're not really the right kind. So that's a very, very important thing, because Mordechai Cohen of Tzfas, he was 1523 to 1598. He has a famous sefer called Sifsei Cohen ala Torah, Shach ala Torah. He's not the same Shach who's on the page of Shulchan Aruch, but he was called one of the Gurei Ha'ari, one of the lion cubs, because he was a student from the school of the Arizal. Never met the Arizal, as far as I know, as an adult. Anyway, maybe he did. Maybe he did. In 1520, he could have. But anyway, he's called him the Gurari, which usually means like the next generation or so. Mordechai Cohen of Tzfas says that and they knew these people, because people would come to the Upper Galilee. It would happen a lot that people would come to Tzfas and to that part of Israel. When they were able to escape from places like Portugal and other places. So he says that the king of Portugal decreed that people must either convert or be burnt at the stake. And there were some Jews who immediately said, where do we go to be burnt alive? Where's the Beis HaSreifa? And they brought along their wives and their children, and they had brought a live band with them. And they said, let's go. It's time to go. And they came in the Betupim U'Mecholos, and they danced and they sang. They knew that the end was near. There was nothing they were going to be able to do. But they could at least do it b'simcha. They could at least go. And like, I really think that we don't, as a people, we haven't taken the lesson from this to celebrate death or martyrdom. So it's not the goal. The goal is just not to give up an ounce, not to give up one minhag, not to give up one Jewish belief or practice. And therefore, that courage, I mean, is a really, really important thing. There's nothing to worry about. I want to suggest that the daiga, the worry that sometimes overtakes people, is it's a mistake, because we don't care that much about our lives when we compare them to what's really important. Jewish people just have something much more significant. We believe in eternity. We believe in Tchias HaMesim. We believe in real, and therefore, it would be bad if something bad happened, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. Now, I know that this can be misused, and this can be, but there has to be an important idea that it says, Vayavo Avram lispod l'Sara v'liv kosa. Avram came to give a hesped for Sarah and to cry for her, and the chaf is small. I think it's about one of the Mefarshim says that he cried less. It's like a funny thing. What do you mean he cried less? Avram loved Sarah Imenu so much. They actually had a good marriage. And they didn't just share a marriage. They shared a dream for the destiny of the human race, which they were successful at implementing. And every one of us is a Ben Avram and a Bas Sarah. And what are you talking about? How do you say he cried less? He must have... And the answer is because he believes in Olam Haba. He believes in eternity. For a person who's a monotheist, who believes in an infinite God, it's much less tragic when somebody dies than for a person who's a completely godless heathen. There's a comfort that we have in Tchias HaMesim, that we have in, and that doesn't, again, so in a sense, there was something that could theoretically dry the tears of an Avram Avinu. A Jew can have something that can ultimately say, even if somebody passed away, yeah, but you know what they did? They were Makadosh Shem Shemayim, and they have Olam Haba, and they can ensure the continuity of the Jewish people, and there's something to that that's really significant. It's not that they're going to go to some big brothel in the sky, right? Which is like, can you imagine being part of a religion where that's the promise? Like one day you'll get to go to a seedy brothel in the sky. It's like an unbelievable... I don't know what tells me more about anybody than what they think happens in heaven. It's like unbelievable. But... we're saying this is a meaningful thing, and I'll just tell you. By the way, remember how Sarah Imenu didn't die until news of the Akedah came? So it's brought down in many svarim that at Akedas Yitzchak Avinu's neshama left him and came back to him. That's just brought down. That this is the first experience of Tchias HaMesim in some sense. He was going to die and he didn't die, and his neshama. You think that Ziv writes about this? Very rational sources write about this from the Midrashim, that there was an element of Tchias HaMesim that happened then, because Sarah Imenu didn't die until Tchias HaMesim was brought to the Jewish people. Once that concept was strong and entrenched, in other words, the idea. What is the concept of Tchias HaMesim? That life in this world is not a goal unto itself, and if God said sacrifice your child, it would be worthwhile. Because you're dealing with eternity here, and now He doesn't want us to sacrifice. He wants us to make the most out of Olam Hazeh and so forth. No, sometimes A person doesn't have to let go. There's a story in the book Encounters from Aryeh Kaplan about the Lubavitcher Rebbe meeting with. Aryeh Kaplan tells a story that there was a woman who her son was dying of cancer, her little son, and she came to the Rebbe, and for consolation. And he said, "Let me ask you a real question. If you knew for sure that God was coming to you and saying, 'It's time for me to take the soul of your son,' would you be able to willingly let him go? If you knew that that's what God for sure wanted." The woman thought and thought. And let's remember, she is a descendant of Avraham Avinu and Yitzchak Avinu. And she said yes. And the Rebbe said, "Then I'm pretty sure that your son is going to be fine." And he was. That's the story. In other words, there's a part of us that has to be able to let things go to Hashem to be able to appreciate their value. And Sarah Imenu only leaves this world after that's been well established. She brings a child to the world, and her husband and her son go off and demonstrate this. And then finally, it says, Parcha Nishmasa. When she heard news of the Akedah, Parcha Nishmasa. So some learn it's because she was so upset. The Sultan showed it to her and she died. But it's brought in the Rishonim, the Riva and others, Rishonim from the family of Rashi, that Parcha Nishmasa is always a language of flowering. It means besimcha. She had such intense simcha when she heard what Avraham and Yitzchak just did, because of her part in that. Batach Balev Baila. I mean, she was instrumental in making Avraham who he was, and she made Yitzchak who he was. And here they are going out and bringing into the world this reality that what life in this world is worth is only how close it can get you to Hashem, and only how nothing is going to scare you. Nothing is going to stand. In other words, there's no fear. What we're starting with, this lack of daiga, is it's not just like, I'm sure everything's going to be okay. You can't be sure everything's going to be okay. Unless you redefine the word okay. And then you can be absolutely sure. Because you can say, you know what, as I go to sleep at night, right, but Yadcha Afkid Rufki, Hashem, if you want me to wake up, I'll wake up. If you don't want me to wake up, I'll accept that. I'll accept that. If that's what it's going to be unpleasant. It's going to make my family sad. It's going to make my friends so. But if that's really what you wanted, then that's really something that we could accept as meaningful and right. And then I really sincerely believe that that's what the Jewish people were doing. Listen to this medrash. Medrash said La'ohavai. No, right? La'ohavai u'lashomrei mitzvosai. Malacha yotze liharig. It says, drop yourself into anywhere in history, right? Danny Lobel has this joke. He says, if somebody gave him a time machine, he wouldn't use it. He says, because I'm worried I'll walk out at any time in history, they'll be like, a Jew! And they'll jump on him and try to kill him. He's like, I can't think of one time in history where it's safe for me to go. Forget it. That's his joke. It's a good art, right? So, in other words, go back in history, jump in that time machine and come out, and you'll find a guy being strung up to be killed. And you'll say, Malacha yotze liharig. What'd you do? You're being brought up to be killed. Well, you must have done something terrible. You know what he's going to say? Al shamalti es bini. I gave my son a bris milah. Right? Because it's barbaric to give your kid a bris milah. So we're going to chop your head off for your barbarism. Malacha yotze lisaref. Why are you being taken out to be burned? Al shakarasi batorah. Because I studied the parsha. I was learning Torah. That's why I'm being burnt to death. Malach hayotze litzalev. Why are you taken out to be crucified? Al sha'achalti es hamatzah. Malach haloket me afargel. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it's a person who's being severely flogged, basically until near death or death in public. Why are you being flogged? Al shanatalti es halulav, because I took the lulav. That's why I'm being killed. That's what happened in Jewish history. Hashem says, that's Ohavai. Those are the people who love me. A person who dies al Kiddush Hashem is saying the following. You see, Rabbeinu Yonah defines what is Kiddush Hashem. So he says, it's when your school takes you to Six Flags, right? Don't behave like a typical 16-year-old boy. Walk around as if you're in a nunnery the whole time. And I don't know. That's what I was told as a kid. That's what I was supposed to do. Very strong speeches. You remember this? If I see any of you, you're all 15-year-old boys. If I see anyone behaving anything like a 15-year-old boy, it's a chil Hashem, and that's the worst sin. And okay, here's what he says. He says, Kiddush Hashem is lekadesh toraso neged b'nei adam. To make the Torah evidently holy in the presence of other people. A person who shows through his behavior that Torah has significantly elevated him. So people that meet a person and see that he's a more sensitive and more kind and more through Torah, that's Kiddush Hashem. And Chil Hashem is a person who demonstrates no such thing. He's known to be a person who studies Torah and lives a life of Torah, and yet and therefore he even points out that it could even be a person at a higher level, who's, in other words, if you'd see a person, right, who's at a really high level of Torah knowledge, and he's walking down the street eating a sandwich, and then he throws the thing, and like the fact that he was eating in the street, and the fact that he's throwing it, it looks to people like he's not been elevated in any way by the Torah. That could be a Chil Hashem for a person. The greater you get, but the point is that it demonstrates the Torah has no impact. The Torah has no impact, and he says conversely, a person who demonstrates that the one thing that matters in the world is God and the Torah. So that person is making a Kiddush Hashem. So the ultimate Kiddush Hashem is a person who says, even my own life is not worth as much as a Kiddush Hashem. And then Rabbi Yonah goes on to say elsewhere in the Igaras HaTshuva, he says every single time a person says Shema, so they can be, if they would have in mind sincerely, B'chol nafshecha, even if my life would be at stake, I'm willing to give that up for Kiddush Hashem. Person says, I'm willing to do it. If they would say, worship idols, or I'll kill you, and you'd be willing to die for that, and you really have that emotion, then it's the same thing as if you did it. And that's why it says it's a medrash, it's a mechilta, which is Alecha haragnu kol hayom. We're killed for you on a daily basis. You can't get killed every single day. If someone embarrasses you a lot, you'll probably get used to it after a few days. Right? Alecha haragnu kol hayom, real death every day. The answer is it's the same thing if you have that in mind. And he brings down that all the things that it says you can't have tshuva for, that there's no tshuva, but Kiddush Hashem is. A person who's makes a real Kiddush Hashem is forgiven everything, even those averas that you can't be forgiven for, like Chil Hashem and other things. So on a daily basis, you can achieve that by really, really being sincere. So now the question is this. It's brought in a bunch of places in the Rishonim. The Rambam in the Igeres Hashmad, and the Radak in the fifth parak of Yirmiyahu, and a few other places say the following. They bring it from Chazals, that if a person was as wicked as Yeravam ben Nevat, who built golden calves. I mean, it's bad news. And he is killed for being a Jew, even if he was a Russia. So a person gets in his car on a Saturday morning to go to a picnic. In other words, I like hearing that people who are simple, not religious, and they were killed for being a Jew, are tremendously compensated. I love hearing that. It's very emotionally satisfying, but it's very hard to understand. What did they do? In other words, if they had been out on a Shabbos morning driving around, which the Torah doesn't really want you to drive on Shabbos, and this person's driving, so we can say Tinuk Shenishma, and they would get in a car accident, God forbid, shouldn't happen to anyone, and they would die. We wouldn't say that they're at the highest level. We don't say that. It's when they're killed for being a Jew. So the question is, what's the milah? So I heard something very interesting. I'm not sure which. I think somebody told me this over recently, b'shem the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but I'm not. I think it goes back. I think it may be that it goes back earlier. We know the concept of mitoch shalo lishma ba lishma. Simply means like this. I'll just illustrate with the Gemara. The Gemara says a person who says sela zeh l'tzedakah al menashe yichya bini. This sela, this contribution should go to charity on condition that my sick son should not die. I want him to live. He's a tzaddik gomor. He's a totally righteous person. Now, that would not seem to be the highest level of charity, because you should be giving not for that. So the Rishonim explain, no, that since we know that when a Jew gives charity, even if his son doesn't survive, God forbid, he's still happy that he gave the charity. He was hoping for his chus or something, but it wasn't motivated. He doesn't say, oh shoot, now I wasted $1,000. It's not it. It was a wonderful thing. He feels good about it. He's happy about it after the fact. It's true, it was motivated by that. Therefore, he can still be called a tzaddik kamer, because we know that motivation is actually secondary to his primary motivation. Mitoch shalo l'shma means that a person who is really ought to be doing things for sincere reasons. But right now, he says, listen, why am I going to give charity? Well, instead, I want to get rich from it, or I'll get covered. It feels good. It feels like power. I walk into the shul, I bid for an aliyah, I buy it from, and give it to this person. I like that feeling. So, great. So it's a good start, at least. It's something. He's still doing a good deed. But the answer is, a person should still do it, because out of that will eventually come a behavior of lishma. So what they said over from the Lubavitch Rebbe is that, no, mitoch. The word toch means the inside. Mitoch shalosha, from the inside of the shalol lishma, is where the lishma comes from. In other words, deep down inside. And this is a big trick. I'll just tell you, like with children, they're always thinking about, you have to read these things, about how to motivate a child. Should you just give them, you say, like, if you are nice to your sister, I'll give you a lollipop? Like, is that a good idea? Is it a bad idea? So they say like this. They did a lot of studying. There was this little boy who was cleaning up. I remember someone telling me, or maybe I read this. He was cleaning up in his school. After like some after-school club, he would like straighten out the chairs, and he wasn't asked to do it. He would stay like 10, 15 minutes, and the people were very impressed. And at some point, after a month of this, they came over to him, and they said, listen, we're really impressed, and we actually even have some money in the budget that we could give you, like $5 each time. They thought, and after like a few days, he stopped doing it, because he didn't want it. 15 minutes for $5 was not worth it for him. Or there was this other one, it might be from Free Economics. There's this one with the kindergarten, where the people were coming late to drop off their kids. So they said it's going to be $20 if you're more than 10 minutes late or whatever. And the incidence of people coming late skyrocketed. Because like, okay, I have a meeting, I have this, like, okay, $20. When you had to deal with someone's feelings, so they had to, like, you keep making someone stay late, now there's a price on it. So you have a kid, and I see this all the time, by the way, in schools, you have a kids groups in the shul or in the school, and they'll be like, this can of Coke for whoever screams benching the loudest. So like, there'll be a kid who's just like, I don't need a Coke that bad. And then they won't do it, because you've just set the price, right, at one can of Coke. And like, if they can get a can of Coke, if their parents are a health coach or something, they will scream that benching as loud as they humanly can. But otherwise, right, they can, you understand, like, they don't need it. They don't need it that bad. So it's very important like this. They say it has to, every time. Let me contrast it with a story. My friend Yaakov Wolbe, Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe, of the famous podcaster, told me a story once of his childhood. His father was a tremendous educator, it seems to me. His grandfather was very famous, was Shlomo Wolbe. And I think his father inherited a lot of that brilliance. So he remembers one time that he came home. I think he had done very well on a Gemara test that he'd worked hard for. I think this was the story. But it was something his father was very proud of. His father smiled and took him by the hand, and without saying much, brought him into his study, opened up his safe, and took out a watch, and gave him this watch as a present. Now, what is it worth? $50, $100, a few hundred, but it wasn't. The watch was expressing this, because you know what really motivated him? You tell your kid, if you do well on this test, I'll give you an expensive thing. No. You've just set the price. But you know what really makes a person feel good is working hard for things and accomplishing and knowing that it's Torah and all the different things that go involved, making your parents proud. There's a lot of true values that are in there. Very few things are worth to our children or to anyone as much, to any of us. Very few things are worth what the admiration and appreciation and true, accolades of the people who we love and respect and care about. That's worth much more than any specific present. So the present, I'm giving you this present as an expression of how proud I am that you made this choice, that you did this thing, that you picked this, or that you're going along. I know you wanted to go to that high school, but I'm your parent and I get to choose, because this is not a healthy thing to just say kids can pick whatever they want. That's not, one day you'll have your own kids, you'll pick for them, right? Which is like a novel thing to tell a kid in Los Angeles. But, but you tell them, listen, I'm the parent, I have to choose. I really care what you feel. I really care what you think. And that's part of my decision still. I still have to make a choice. But to sit the kid down and say, here's why we're doing this. And I'm proud that you're buying in. And I'm impressed that even though I see it's hard for you, you're willing to buy into this, I think. And here's what I want to give you. It's no longer a bribe. Does that make sense? The shalol lishma is a way of expressing the lishma in such a situation. And that's the difference. In other words, to never give a prize is a silly methodology. But to avoid prizes being the goal, and how does this explain this? So first of all, it's a very good thing to think about. But practically it means this person who's being killed, al Kiddush Hashem, because they're a Jew, are they thinking about it? So the truth is, on the outside they might not be thinking about it, but we're telling you that mitoch, and the inside, who they really are, is lishma. They're not bikaros. If a person is completely ideologically made the choices to, it's another story. But the good that they're doing, the good that they're doing, giving their life, al Kiddush Hashem, giving their life as a Jew, saying, I'm a Jew, and I'm willing, mitoch, on the deepest level, right, of a shelo lishma action, is where the lishma is, because we know that Jewish people, deep down, the Rambam says, every Yid wants to do the right thing. Sometimes you can beat a person up until he says, I want, because he really wants deep down inside. It's only the outside nonsense that makes him not want to give his wife the get. And you can beat him up. It's like a funny Rambam. There's a lot of truth to it. There's a lot of real truth to it inside of every one of us. That we want to do the right thing, and we want to be connected, and we want to be spiritually greater. And therefore, perhaps that's a way of understanding. I don't know. I'm still struggle with this. I can't say that I have the real answer to why it is that a person who's killed for those reasons. But perhaps it's because if you look at the inside of the person, they wanted it so much on such a real level. And maybe we'll just finish with this. Rabbi Akiva, we've said this before many times in different ways, and I have different answers to this. But Rabbi Akiva says, Kol Yamai. As Rabbi Akiva's dying, he says, all my life I was yearning, when can I give my life for Kriyashma? All my life. So I understand, for the first 40 years, he wasn't saying Shema. He wasn't religious, right? It says, it's in the he didn't know Aleph Beis, he didn't know Shema, the first 40 years. So how could he say my whole life? So you have different approaches to answer this. His life only started, all different approaches. But one, in my opinion, according to what we just said, the truth about every single Jew, the truth is that even at moments where the person is not so observant and not so connected, and not all they really want deep down inside in their soul is to be connected into Torah and connected to Hashem and to give their life for something meaningful ultimately, they'd be pleased to do it. That's what they really, really want. And Rabbi Akiva is only getting to this point at the end of his life where he realized that's all I ever wanted. And did I know that I wanted it? Probably not. It could be that that's what he's saying. Kol Yamai, just like what we just said, that even the person who this happens to, Rabbi Akiva, we understand. Well, what about the other people? That's what I started with. Harugei Malchus. And the answer is no. The lesson of Rabbi Akiva is that Kol Yamai, is that this is really what we stand for, and it's really what we want, and we're yearning for that. We're yearning for an opportunity to give everything for Hashem. And the good news is you can do it while you're still alive. You can do it when you say Shema. You can do it on a daily basis, right? By saying Shema and saying, I'm bought into this, and Bez Hashem, I think that with these, some of these perspectives, we can feel the pride of being the lions of world history, the ones who nobody can touch, nobody can mess with, because at the end of the day, you understand? At the end of the day, we do whatever we want. You could kill us. Oh, yeah, that's true. You could kill. That's the one thing we haven't figured out quite how to stop yet. But you can't change one minig of the Jewish people that you want to get rid of. If there's a way we tie our shoelaces, you're not going to mess it. There's nothing you can do to change how we're going to behave and how we want to be. And Bez Hashem, I think with that courage and that confidence, we can banish the fear and the daiga. And let's keep spreading these messages to ourselves, to our children, of look how beautiful the Jewish people. Look at the courage that they're displaying. Look at these beautiful soldiers. Look at these beautiful experiences. That's all. Okay, Yasher Koch, and thank you so much to the Lalazaris for hosting this beautiful shir.